Hello and welcome to the Audiobook Club. In this week's episode, I'm thrilled to be joined with the wonderful audiobook narrator and voice artist, Erin Bennett. Erin, thank you so much for joining me on the show. How are you today?
Oh, I'm fantastic, John. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. It's great to be, I love it how we sound like we're in the next room or the same room with one another, and we're, cross continents and oceans.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Lovely stuff. Now, if we may, I'd love to start right at the very beginning. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in the world of voice acting and audiobooks?
Sure. So I'm originally from Northern California, but I went to a conservatory theater school in Boston, and part of that education included a semester at Lambda, the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art, which I know I don't need to tell you or your listeners what that is, but, where Americans were all so proud when we go across the pond. When we try out our our mediocre British accents on an unsuspecting public, which is what I did an awful lot of. And then I finished my last year in Boston, graduated, went to New York for about a year, started doing regional theater, then came back to Los Angeles, started working in commercials on camera, realizing I could make a living, at least temporarily, and settled in LA, where a lot of my family is, and I've been in LA ever since. My voice acting, I recorded just kind of a first demo when I was in college. I grabbed a bunch of magazines, I tweaked some copy, I picked some music samples, and I tried to make little commercials. It's very funny. But a gentleman heard one of my demos and from a radio station and said, "You got to keep at this." And he recut my demo for me and put it on it was just apropos of nothing. And that was kind of my first, and then I sort of played it for my classmates. And I have a lot of classmates who went on to become, quite famous in television and movies. And I was always a character actress who, when I played these tapes for them, everyone's interest was piqued. And it was kind of the thing that set me apart, because I wasn't going to be, I didn't know at the time. I mean, I loved Shakespeare and everything, but I was not going to be able to make, a life being on camera. And that really wasn't where my interest lay anyway. So always fascinated by the voice, always fascinated by listening to stories. And through the way I came to audiobooks was actually quite convoluted. I was hired on camera at Paramount to do the cast of Torchwood, which is a very popular BBC show.
Yeah.
Filmed a season in America, filmed a TV show. But while they were filming, they were also recording radio dramas, because that's very popular. And they needed the role of like an American marine biologist for one of their episodes. So I auditioned on camera for an off-camera role, got it, and showed up one day at a studio with John Barrowman and the rest of the cast. He immediately ran up to me, grabbed me, spun me around. I think he kissed me on both cheeks, and I was, of course, absolutely smitten.
Yeah.
And we did this old-timey radio drama, which have not been done a whole lot in the U.S. It's not a tradition, but it's one that I love. So I was thrilled. I was the only American. I was fangirling out with the cast of Torchwood.
Yeah.
And during that session, a producer from the next studio over popped his head in and later asked me if I recorded audiobooks. I lied through my teeth. I said, of course I did. And the week after that, I was recording my first audiobook and going home and sweating every day after the session. And that was the beginning. That was 2012.
Wow. That is incredible. It sounds like you really made an impression, whenever you were you were out and about recording things, it does sound like you must have, you must have really made a good impression for these, in front of these producers and such. That must have been incredibly nice as a performer.
It was. And of course, I'm mentioning to you the peak experiences. I was also working with my dear friend and colleague, Scott Holst, who had a voiceover workout group where we just had copy, slogged it out for an hour and a half once a week. I drove to Santa Monica. We all worked. We were all actors, just learning in the trenches together, working, paying to work, paying for classes, doing all this stuff, just the rehearsal, the stuff where there's no immediate reward.
Yeah.
Where you're going, God, it would be nice to film this, to tape the spot for Gatorade, or to be the voice of the new Honda CR, whatever it is, but it's totally aspirational. And you're just slogging it out week after week. So there was a lot of that too. At the time, I lived in a tiny apartment in Los Angeles, and I would drive it was too loud. I couldn't record. So I would drive to my grandmother's house. She lived up in the Hollywood Hills. And I set up a little mini studio in an upstairs walk-in closet of hers.
Nice.
And I would go there, and I would have a visit with her. And then when enough visiting had happened, I'd say, okay, Grandma, I got to go, I got to go to record my auditions and stuff. And I'd go do that. And then I'd come back. It was exhausting, but I did it, and I was building it, slowly, so that when that moment happened where the producer was like, "You do audiobooks, right?" Which coincided with there was a huge swell going on in the industry. There was a huge surge of content that suddenly needed to be put into audio. So, I mean, I don't want to say everyone with a pulse, but I was certainly someone with a pulse who would show up on time.
Yeah.
And want to do a good job and not flake out on, because I was going to the occasional, commercial audition and stuff like that, but it just wasn't happening anymore. And, the regional theater was great, but it's very hard to make a living. It's very hard to do that. I know everybody who's listening knows this, and I was coming up against it, and I had no idea that I had some idea that the world of audiobooks was available to actors, because I was doing classical theater, or, like more classic plays. Yeah. I was doing a Noel Coward at the Pasadena Playhouse, and I was doing some School for Scandal or something at A Noise Within, which is a wonderful classical theater here in Los Angeles. And people in the cast, sort of, the senior established actors who I looked up to, I started to notice that a lot of them had something in common. That was, they narrated audiobooks.
Oh, right.
And they were the nicest people. I remember sitting on the fire escape at the Pasadena Playhouse. I had a tiny little, silent role, and I was understudying a bunch of people. And, one of the main, the senior, the elder statesman, would talk to me about their careers and what they were doing, and I would listen to their audiobooks, and I went, wow, isn't it fascinating that the nicest people I know in the theater, who are also extraordinarily talented, are all involved in audiobooks. So when I did get that call, and I said, oh, of course, sure, audiobooks are I'm ready. I called a couple of those friends in a panic. In fact, I'd done a Stoppard play with Robertson Dean. I was his kid, and he was Henry, the main role. God, I still remember. He's just fascinating. And I called him. He says, "Erin, get over here. Just like come here. I can't do his voice, but come here. Just sit in front of me. Sit in that chair. Okay, read." And, and then he gently and not so gently corrected and said, okay, try this. And then before I knew it, it was doable. I was more or less in the pocket. But that was, I think it was a 6-day book. And those were the days where the end days of paper scripts. So I remember being in the booth with the engineer on the other side of the glass with my water, trying not to move, trying not to make noise when I turned the pages, and thinking like, surely it's time for a break. Wasn't time for a break. And getting home every day and just feeling like I'd been beaten. It was crazy. And then, 500 audiobooks later.
Yeah, do you know, what a set of experiences. I do have a lot of questions from what you've said, but the first one, so being based in LA, I can imagine that being a pretty incredible experience on its own. But LA has a reputation for being a rather brutal. It can be a challenging place for performers and creatives. Would you say that there's any truth to that? What's LA really like for actors and those pursuing creative careers?
Keep in mind, this is my experience. So I can't speak for anyone else. But LA is hard. My ideal kind of theatrical experiences happened when I was in London, and I saw the National Theatre do plays in rep. I'll never forget it. I saw, I think it was Troilus and Cressida on a Friday night, and then the core cast came back on Saturday and did Leonard Bernstein's Candide, which is just absolutely insane. Yeah. So actors could do anything. So I thought, all right, if this is what I aim to do, because I sing as well, and and I play piano, and I thought, all right, if I want to be this kind of performer, that way, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
And what I was not prepared for was especially with theater conservatory training, where, we were shuffled into the roles that were most appropriate for us from between the ages of 18 and 22. But still, I was not prepared for the camera. Mm-hmm. And I started doing commercials when they started wanting the look of quote unquote real people, not just aspirational beer commercial models. I suddenly was wanted for kind of subtle expressions. And when I look back at pictures, like the Polaroids of myself at that time, not Polaroids, but like when they were doing the costumes, they still did Polaroids at the time. Yeah. And I go, oh my God, at this time in my life, I would have died to be 10 pounds thinner, and look how thin I was. So I was kind of at my peak physically, and it is very much about what your face and body look like. Mm-hmm. And I was in denial, absolute denial about that. And besides, I wanted to be, I wanted to play Rosalind in As You Like It. I thought I could sort of escape that. So people I know people in the music business, I know people in the animation business, voiceover, on camera, you name it. People who are screenwriters. Mm-hmm. And it is brutal on each and every one of them for various and sundry ways. And I was in therapy for a long time to deal with this. Mm-hmm. To be able to take my sort of my dreams and aspirations and what I thought I could sort of mold myself to be, and what a camera saw when it looked at me. Mm-hmm. Those were two different things in my mind. And the time when I was most successful and most able to be what I wanted to be was when I was behind a microphone. Because what I look like is irrelevant. Yeah. And I'm not ragging on myself. I love myself. I have a glamorous side, and I have a very very kind of messy, unglamorous side, and I love all of them. And I'm at peace with that. But the TV is a visual medium, and the theater is not, and voiceover is not. So trying to juggle all those things is exhausting. Plus, if you're going out for roles constantly in the theater, and then also on camera, maybe a little part in a small part in a TV show, like a co-star. The constant demands of auditioning and also trying to have a day job are are really difficult to manage. You know, the rents are rising. It's more and more expensive. So, but you find your tribe, you find your therapist, you find ways of, you know, you find ways of dealing and finding your way through it. And it has rewards. It has rewards, and it has very low times. But, you know, if you're, and LA, frankly, is not my favorite city, but it's a hell of a lot easier to live here. And I'm a Californian, so but kind of by birth. So I remember what that first winter in Boston and the winds. Oh my God, you know, it's just so your lifestyle, you know, you can go to the beach, and if you know where to park, it's free. So being a poor actor, I think is easier. A poor young actor is easier to do in LA. It's harder to be an older poor actor. So it's the years you have between the young and poor and the middle-aged, or I'm not middle-aged yet, but I'm getting there. those other years, you have time to find out where you're going to be. Yeah. You just have to know that it's going to take a while. And you know, and as a woman and a mother on the older side of the spectrum for motherhood, that can get delayed, and that is difficult. So it's just hard. It's hard to put I often had this feeling, sort of like, well, when something big happens, then it'll all fall into place. And nothing big, in quotes, happened, but a lot of little things did happen, and before I knew it, I realized I was making a life, and I could have a life, and I could have a family.
Would you say that it kind of sort of crept up on you, really? Your success kind of crept up on you, rather than you sort of expect this one, overnight change. But instead it was more of a steady, and then suddenly realize, hang on a second, I'm doing everything that I'm set out to do. Well,
Success looks very different to other people. I mean, I've been invited to houses where, there's a view, and there's a pool, and there's a, there's that car in the driveway, and that is one measure of success. That's not going to be me. I'm not going to have a house in Malibu and that I think that ship has sailed. But if you're looking at someone, a success often doesn't feel like a success in the moment, because it's scary, sort of like quitting one's day job. And people who aren't able yet to quit their day jobs go, "Oh my God, I can't wait to do that, but I can't yet." That's a real success story. But let me tell you, when you quit your day job and then you're looking at the calendar, and the calendar's got holes in it, you might not feel so successful. But someone who just shot a pilot that isn't going to be picked up, and they thought they were on their way, that's that feels. Do those failures feel the same? Maybe they do. So the fact that I'm able to make a living at it, that's at my standard of living. But that's that's driving a nice car, but not not a BMW. So if you want the BMW, you may have a different view of success.
I understand completely. I think we're very similar, actually. I think we share a lot of the same values, it sounds like. I understand completely. You have narrated hundreds of titles for the biggest publishers on the globe, narrating books written by some incredibly successful names. What is it about audiobooks specifically that keep you coming back as a performer?
They keep calling me. I pursued for so long different different aspects of the
Mm-hmm.
of the performing world, and I would try 9 times out of 10 it would be no, and then the 10th time I'd get something.
Yeah.
Oh, and it would be a peak experience. It would be wonderful. And then the lows would continue. And I would go, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to put 3 different changes of clothes in my car because I've got to go to these different calls? Do I really, I'm having trouble maybe memorizing some of these sides. What's that about? But when I'm home, I can grab a cup of coffee. I can run my fingers through my hair, put on my headphones, and I can close my eyes and imagine, and where am I, or what am I? Or in the days before, my agents in Beverly Hills, when we would still go in to the studio, I would get all dolled up. I mean, for voiceover, right? But because that waiting room was filled with voices and incredible people who were, by the way, very much more successful than I in the commercial VO world. So I'd be pulling up a chair and just listening at their elbow. But I would also get to do partner reads in the room with them. And I swear to you, it's 45 minutes over that hill to get there. I would do, some warm-ups in the car. I'd listen to commercial radio, kind of get myself just in that pocket.
Yeah.
And I'd be there, and maybe I would be auditioning for a 30-second spot and maybe a 15-second tag for something else. Maybe, let's say, another 30-second commercial. And then it would be over. And then I could drive home and record an audiobook. So I'd have the audition opportunities in the morning, which 9 times out of 10 I'm not going to get. But then have the sure thing, or the bird in the hand, if you will.
Yeah.
Of recording an audiobook. And I just realized I completely forgot your question.
It was.
I'm sorry.
It was about. Sorry, I forgot it myself. There, it took me by surprise. It's essentially about what about audiobooks specifically do.
Oh, keeps coming back.
Yeah,
that they're calling me. That I'm getting an email saying, "We have this. Can you do it?"
Yeah.
And I say, "Yes, absolutely."
Yeah.
And there's not much that I have to turn down. And fortunately, this is just this is not everyone's experience, but I am extraordinarily fortunate in that I have not been typecast. I do virtually every genre in audiobooks, with the exception of, I don't do a whole lot of sci-fi, although I just did a sci-fi trilogy that I'm really, really excited about, a multicast recording.
Nice.
But biography, memoir, mystery, cozy mystery, fiction, literary fiction, romance, women's literature. I hate that term. Women's fiction, religious,
do you find
fantasy.
yourself? Do you find yourself getting getting on a project, narrating a book that you wouldn't necessarily pick up in your free time, and then
all the time,
suddenly, and then at the end you walk away going, do you know what? That was probably one of the my favorite projects one of the favorite books to read.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. That's part of the joy of it. I'm still trying to get through Middlemarch, and David Copperfield. I love the classics, and I often don't have time to read for pleasure.
Yeah.
Just purely for my own pleasure.
Yeah.
So I am introduced to so much wonderful work. I just narrated a memoir of a woman who grew up in the 50s and 60s in the Mormon Church in America. Talk about an experience at being inside somebody's head and history. I would not have picked this book up any other way, but it found its way to me, and it was utterly absorbing, and breathtaking. So it is. I feel fortunate to. I never would have picked up a cozy mystery. Cozy mysteries are what they're called in America. I'm not sure what they're called in England, but they're your somebody's killed, but it's not terribly sad, and it's not messy, and there's somebody, usually a plucky librarian, who's got to solve the crime, and maybe they have a pet, like generally a cat, and there's a lot of visiting, a lot of snacking, sometimes there's pies that are baked, there's a lot of tea having. And
sort of like Agatha Christie sort of style.
Yes, like this is our version of Agatha Christie. And what's wonderful about those, they're little jewel boxes of books because they're populated by an entire village. It's like it's almost like Doc Martin. I don't know if you remember the series.
I do.
At the denizens of Port Wen are every single colorful local character you can imagine populate these books. So by the time you're done, you've essentially had tea or snacks with everyone in the village, and you've come to have all these people in your living room, so to speak.
Yeah.
So, I remember when I got my first cozy mystery, like, all right, well, here goes, just we'll belly up to the microphone and see what I find, and coming out of it just smiling ear to ear.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I think we call them over here whodunits.
Whodunits.
Yeah, it's which I prefer cozy mystery. I think it sounds better.
Cozy mystery. Not just a mystery or a thriller, but a cozy mystery. I love whodunits because someone's got to say who done it.
It's sort of that thing of you don't know the answers, but that's okay. You're okay with it. It's cozy. You're fine with it.
Oh yes, and it all gets wrapped up in a little bow, at the end, and everyone's fine, and the bad person is carted off to jail, and we never hear from them again. Ta-da-da.
Yeah, I like it a lot. There's that cliche with voice actors that anyone who bumps into them isn't safe from their voice being stolen and stored away. Is there any truth to that in your process when coming up with voices for characters? Where do you draw upon to create those voices?
Well, when I have big fantasy novels, I did a series of fantasy novels that all have battles and have orcs and elves and witches and fairies, and that is, I steal absolutely brazenly from every Lord of the Rings, all my childhood listening to the full cast recordings of The Hobbit, but you'd hopefully never know because it's filtered through my voice. So, unless I'm like doing like a Christopher Walken impression, you're not going to know.
Yeah.
I may, there may be a flavor of somebody, but I can't do doing a character would be way too exhausting and inappropriate, actually.
Yeah.
So, there's just a little bit, there's a little Ian McKellen here, there's a little Kate Blanchett there's a little, it really helps. It really helps with doing accents too, to have an actor in mind.
I was going to ask, because accents can be a huge part of an audiobook, most often the narrator having to switch between a variety in a short period of time and all that sort of thing. I wanted to know your approach to working in different accents. Is it a skill that has come easy to you? Did it take a lot of time, a lot of work over time?
A lot of work over time. We did learn the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet, in school, and I remember thinking, what the hell am I going to ever use this for? Like, this is a waste of my time. And it absolutely was not. I mean, joke's on me. I am continually being surprised by how a supposition I've had is just thrown on its head. And all of my youthful geeking out and rewatching of Pride and Prejudice with Jennifer Ely and Colin Firth, they've all served me in good stead. I mean, I hope. And or listening to Mark Twain. Oh my gosh, I have speaking of cozy mysteries, I have a series that I was completely 99 people out of 100 would say I'm utterly miscast for. The protagonist is a middle-aged, older Southern male from Mississippi. And somehow I was dropped into it, and I've been using these kind of, Mark Twain genteel Southern accents for this, to populate this world, because that's the way it's written. If it was more contemporary, I'd probably do a little more contemporary sound, but that's just kind of the world that this author has. And, who knew that really absorbing movies and recordings as a child, would would do me well. I think I watched The Sound of Music probably 968 times. I'm the oldest of 4 children, so whatever I had was also filtered through my siblings.
Yeah.
So, I have a Julie Andrews RP at the drop of a hat. Because, Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. I've just got it.
That's good. Yeah.
She's there, I could be a singing nun in anything. Just put it out there, universe. And some of that is, kind of jokes on me. I have accents in my head that were never real, but were in the Philadelphia story,
Yeah.
Walter, for people saying the name Walter, and then after a long time, this girl, they said girl, even though no American ever said that, but we have this thing where, British voice and speech training and elocution were taught to the studio actors of the 1940s. And they adopted this completely made-up, pretend, they call it mid-Atlantic speech, which exists, in a very kind of narrow realm of movies from the 30s and 40s. So, there are these just weird facets to speech that if they're put in you from a young age or at a formative age or through repetition, you can absorb them. Now, there are some things I am terrible at absorbing. I went to school in Boston for 4 years and still cannot do a Boston accent to save my life. But Yiddish or Brooklyn, New York, let me at it. I must have been an old Jewish man in another life. Also, my relatives on that side of my family are Chicago Jews. So I've got their cadence in my. So also having a family from lots of other different places gives me lots of colorful characters to work with.
Yeah, I find that so fascinating. And I suppose, I guess our mind is it's just a sponge, isn't it? Open to, and you don't always realize, it's not always obvious, what you pick up and what you can, what sort of sticks in, as you say. I find it so fascinating. When working with publishers and studios such as, Harper, Penguin Random House, Dreamscape, Tantor, the list goes on, would you be able to tell us about your pre-production process? What should a narrator have ready before beginning that first day of recording?
Well, I used to read the script twice. I now read it once. And I'm ready to go. I would exhort everyone to read the script. And I know that sounds... I know there's going to be a camp that says, "Well, of course I'm going to read the script." Like, what are you talking about? And the other, like, you know what? I'm busy, and I'm going to pick it up, and my voice is good, and I'm confident, and I'm just going to sail through it. And I will say to you, everyone has had the experience where there's a couple things where, in some books, toward the end, sometimes something can be revealed about a character that you don't get to, that really affects the way you would play the character, sometimes with an accent. And you don't want to get to the end and find that you've been pronouncing a name incorrectly or something like that. So, I don't want to start being like, this is the horror show that can happen to you, but everyone's got that story. And 2, I would have to say, I have heard some recordings of actors who it's pretty obvious they're reading it for the first time. And it's a disservice to the listener. Yeah. That's all I can say about that. Yeah. Read the book. If you have questions, you can contact the publisher. You can look up words that you don't know how to pronounce. You can read it quickly. I'm not going to say how fast how slow you have to read it. You don't have to spend a week thinking about it, but But to read and mark up your text is something you should do, once before you record it.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. I've heard a lot of horror stories as well where there's been an accent reveal for a character, 3/4 of the way through.
Oh God.
I couldn't imagine anything worse.
It's yeah, and that said, we have all been in places where we're being pulled in 5 different directions, and we don't always have time.
Yeah.
But you can learn, you can skim, you can really go through a book quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And and give it. You can yes, you can do that. And there are certain parts, in nonfiction where you're really going to need to have a lot of stamina for the material. So the more familiar with it, the more familiar that you are with it, the better you're going to be able to connect with the listener about something that may be very, very quite dense indeed.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, actually, because I think there is a sort of sometimes one of those things with nonfiction is people think that it can get sort of, I don't know, that it doesn't take as much prep, and I guess in some ways it's different, but I'm a sort of still believer of you should, it does help to, as you say, connect with the text first, especially if it is quite a challenging topic, or maybe not that, obviously. I don't want to say obviously interesting because that sounds a little bit harsh, but I think it's a really fascinating topic. I just wondered, have you any advice for those who have only maybe narrated independently from home studios, etc., but are soon to be working with a director, a producer, an engineer at a studio, for example? What traits are they looking for in a narrator that would help set a good impression?
Well, it's a privilege to be working with an engineer and director. Those are exciting times. I came up where you went into a studio and you were directed and engineered by the same person. In the beginning of the business, I understand sometimes there was an engineer and a separate director. That has all been condensed by many people to often a narrator working by themselves.
Yeah.
And that can be extremely isolating. I only work with an engineer because I'm very respectful of what the job that the engineer does. I'm used to directing myself, but I love it when I get the opportunity to be directed. And I would say when you have that opportunity, the most important thing you can do, I think, is be prepared and go in with an open mind.
Yeah.
When I'm directing someone, I don't direct audiobooks generally, but I did direct this one actor once. He was absolutely incredible. He'd done all these major campaigns for like Ford and stuff, and then he was doing this special audiobook, and I had the fortune of directing him. And I'm telling you, he didn't treat this job that paid probably a quarter or a 20th of something he could make in the same time for a major client.
Yeah.
In the commercial world, he treated it with the same reverence, and my jaw was on the floor. I was like, this guy,
Yeah.
Some people come in with attitude, they're like, I'm an with the unsaid understanding being like, I don't usually do this, but I'm doing this today, and here I am, and everything I say that comes out of my mouth is going to be acceptable to you.
Yeah.
So audiobook directors in general are absolutely masters of their craft. And I often think when I'm recording without a director of some things that a director might have said to me in a session 2 years ago are still coming back to help me. So be a sponge. Everybody works a little bit differently, even though the general parameters are the same. And be open. be open to being directed, being open to trying something in a different way, being open to being a little uncomfortable. Maybe you're used to and comfortable narrating a certain way, but when you've got another set of ears to guide you and to say, well, let's try this way. Can you give me a little bit more of this? Okay, try suppressing this part a little bit. I want more of this to come out. Or I want you to just have a conversation with me. You're telling me the story. You're not a professor talking to a big conference room or a big university hall of 150 students. I want you to have an intimate conversation with me right here, right now, just the two of us.
Yeah.
Someone may be playing with the scale that you're using. Someone might be giving you notes on a character or encouraging you to go in a certain way. Or they may let you ride for pages and pages without saying a thing. So you've got to be comfortable with any of that. Know that if you're going on and on and on and the director isn't popping in, you're doing just fine.
Yeah.
And try not to get in your head about it too much. You've got a lot of material to chew through, so the director also has their eye on the clock and the page count, and some things are just purely practical. There's a certain amount of studio time that's allotted for this, and we've got to chew through that audio. We've got to chew through those pages. So there's not going to be a whole lot of time to stop and debate a whole lot of things. Yeah. So, just take it in, make an adjustment, take a breath. I think something we can all be guilty of is we're so eager to keep going that the direction comes in. We don't necessarily, as an actor, really take it in, but go, okay, I think I know what she means, and I'm going to keep going. Where actually it could have been helpful if I just paused, took it in, took a breath, thought about it, decide what I'm going to do, inhale, and begin again. Just 5 seconds more. So all those things, all those plates spinning at once. I know it's a lot, but it's no different than when you're in a rehearsal room for a play. The director's got an hour and a half to block this scene, and then we got to move on.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's really great advice. It's, as you say, it can be very difficult with a lot of things going on at once and getting inside your head. And there is I don't know whether it's just, I don't think it's just narration or just voiceover work and things. I think it's maybe everything, that there's such a psychological element to it as well that you have to be aware of and nurture, I guess.
Absolutely. I should take my own advice, but I have to say, having a physical practice of some sort of exercise, getting outside in the sun is really important. We're in these little boxes for a long periods of time talking to ourselves, or talking to, our engineer, and to really be able to juggle things and not get in one's head. When I look at the microphone, it's a giant ear, and it's a lot of stimulation right in front of your face. But my legs, my arms, the trunk of my body, all of that, it has to be engaged. Otherwise, I'm just talking from the neck up. And as an actor, if it doesn't drop down into yourself, into your body, you're not connected. Or I speak for myself. If it doesn't drop down into my body, I am not really present as a performer. I'm just a talking head going ba 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 ba. So I try to think of myself, because I'm, just a sucker for, classic plays. And plays that were formative to me in my formative years. I think of Thornton Wilder's Our Town. I think I'm like the stage manager, sitting on the edge of the stage. Sometimes I'm leaning on the proscenium march. I'm looking at the action. I'm coming to talk to the audience about what's happening. I'm kind of going in and out throughout this set, which is no set, which is just kind of really people interacting in a space with my audience. So I have to keep, I try to keep as physically active as possible. I tend to wave my arms around. I tend to, and do all of it in kind of a quiet way. Sometimes I'm, making little adjustments in my pelvis, or, with my back, with my arms, to try to stay as physically active as possible. So when you're performing, when you're narrating, just try to keep physically present, and that will help. I'm trying to circle that back to all these things that we have to juggle: the time, the page count, the director popping in here saying, "Hey, that voice that you were doing for that character before, it's slipped a little bit. Can we get back to where it was?" All those things, and like, oh my God, I got to get this pillow over my tummy because I'm getting a little hungry, and I'm starting to hear a little. So I got to get this pillow over, all those things you can do if you're really staying open.
Yeah. I think you're right. And again, super fascinating. I don't think it's spoken about enough. I find that whole side incredibly interesting. I just popped a cheeky look at the time, and I cannot believe how far, how quickly this has gone. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. Just before we run out of time, have you any projects coming up in the future that you're excited for that you can talk about?
Yes, I've got a project. I've got a book that's coming out soon called Zaybarz, which is a very famous delicatessen in New York, and it's a story of the Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe who were the seeds of that family, which has the story of them coming to America and establishing a life in New York City and creating eventually their own family business. I am so guilty of reading a blurb of something and having no idea what it really represents. And my half of my family is Jewish and has that Jewish immigrant Ellis Island story, and I was utterly shocked at how moved I was by reading about just the saga of one family coming to America across the ocean and having to make a life in another country. That story alone, I'm not even talking about how delicious Zaybarz, chocolate babka is. Forget that. But finding out where American institutions like this deli have come from, how did they start? The people who make up a story it's just fascinating. So that is coming up. Zaybarz, I think it's called A Family Story with Recipes.
Nice.
Written by Lori Zaybar, is coming out for Penguin Random House. And I have another book that is a great work of science fiction by a seminal a lesbian science fiction writer, Catherine V. Forrest. This trilogy, the Daughters of a Coral Dawn series, about a group of women who decide to leave the earth. It's absolutely, it was written in the 70s, and at first I was like, what is this? Well, okay, all right, what's my part? Here we go. What is the play, and what is my part? I mean, I'm nothing but I'm Bottom the Weaver in Midsummer Night's Dream. I'm sorry. I'm just, and I know I'm connecting with my fellow voice actors because I know you guys are too. We all want to play every part. But anyway, this is a multicast with great people like Hillary Huber and Frankie Corzo. And I was like, okay, what's my part? And I was at Out Loud Studios in Burbank. And every time we had a page break, the engineer and I were going, this is amazing. Why is she not up there with Isaac Asimov? And what? This is hilarious. This is like Star Trek, but but hilarious and satirical and mysterious, and I have no idea what's going to happen next. Even though I read ahead, I still like forgot, like I am just being taken by surprise. I can go to the outer reaches of the galaxy with one book, and back to the Jewish Pale of Settlement in 1908, and they're worlds apart, but I get to be in those worlds. So those are two incredibly separate projects for each other. And then last thing coming up, I have been narrating Ellen Hilderbrand's books for a long time. She is a classic escapist beach read. Her stories take place on Nantucket, which is Nantucket Island, which is just about one of the most aspirational, wonderful food porn, lifestyle porn, vacation porn, escape, relationship porn. It's like the most wonderful, soapy, and she's such a good writer. I mean, she will take you deep, deep within characters, and you just ache for them, and you celebrate with them, and that is really funny. And after I do one of her books, so the Hotel Nantucket is coming, and that is just like pour yourself a glass of champagne and close your eyes and turn on a heat lamp wherever you are if it's cold, and just escape. So I love doing her books too. So the Hotel Nantucket's coming out. Zaybarz, a family saga with recipes, and the Daughters of a Coral Dawn trilogy from Catherine V. Forrest. That's for Audible.
Very nice. Those sound like varied, but all very, very, very good projects. Wow.
Very, very, very different from one another, but very, just different as heck. And then, one of my favorite things to do every night is, reading, oh God, over and over, a bedtime story to my 3-year-old. I try to mix it up because she wants she wants some of these stories over and over, and I try to make it interesting for myself, and I try to change it up, because sometimes the last thing you want to do is narrate again after you're in the booth, but it makes a difference when you're narrating to your own kid, so that's fun.
Yeah, I bet. Do you ever try out new voices?
Oh yeah. I do all the time, and sometimes she looks at me like, Mommy.
Just be reading away and then submit. Hang on a second, that's a good one.
It's fun to let her fill in the blanks. Good night, moon. Good night, light and the red balloon. Good night, cow jumping over the moon.
Yeah.
It's good. We that's how we learn. So
absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much once again for joining us on the show. All of links to social media accounts or websites, etc., can be found in the show notes. And that just about does it for this week's episode. Another huge thank you to Erin, and a thank you, as always, to the listener for making us a part of your day. Thanks very much, Erin.
John, it was just an unadulterated pleasure. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. It's a privilege.
Oh, bless you. That's very nice of you to say. Thank you.